Okay, we will now proceed with the division on Amendment 11, and members should cast their votes now. And the vote is now closed. Point of order, Neil Gray.
I can see I have voted no.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Confirm your vote was counted. Point of order, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Sorry, my app wouldn't I would have voted no.
If I could have a little less noise in the chamber, I may have a chance of hearing. You're now heckling me. Point of order, Alex Cole-Hamilton. Okay, we can't hear.
I hope you can hear me now, Presiding Officer. My app wouldn't connect and I would have voted no.
Could you please repeat that, Mr. Cole-Hamilton?
And my app wouldn't connect, so I would have voted no.
I'm afraid the audio isn't sufficient to record that, Mr. Cole-Hamilton. Okay, the result of the vote on Amendment 11 in the name of Jeremy Balfour is yes 1, no 95. There were 18 abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. That takes us to Group 5, Ancillary Provision. I call Amendment 9 in the name of the Minister in a group on its own. Minister to move and speak to Amendment 9. Minister.
Amendment 9 makes a procedural change to align the scope of the power in Section 3 to make ancillary regulations with that in the power to make such provision in commencement regulations. This creates internal consistency throughout the bill. This amendment makes no substantive changes to the intention or the meaning of the bill, but rather ensures clarity and consistency. I therefore move Amendment 9 and recommend the Chamber support this.
Thank you, and I call Liz Smith.
Thank you. Very little to add to what the Minister has just said, because it is an important but technical amendment. And as we are reaching the end of the amendment stage, can I just put on record my thanks to everybody who has proposed different amendments and for their very considerable engagement throughout this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Smith. And the Minister to wind up.
Presiding Officer, I recommend the Chamber support Amendment 9.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 9 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is agreed. As members, that concludes Stage 3 consideration of amendments. As members will be aware, the Presiding Officer at this stage is required under standing orders to decide whether or not, in her view, any provision of the bill relates to a protected subject matter, that is, whether it modifies the electoral system and franchise for Scottish Parliament elections. In the case of this bill, in the Presiding Officer's view, no provision in the Schools Residential Outdoor Education Scotland Bill relates to a protected subject matter. Therefore, the bill does not require a supermajority to be passed at Stage 3. The next item of business is the debate on motion 20138 in the name of Liz Smith on the Schools Residential Outdoor Education Scotland Bill at Stage 3. I call on Liz Smith, the member in charge, to speak to and move the motion. Around 6 minutes. Ms Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and can I move the motion in my name? Throughout all my 16 years as a secondary school teacher and the subsequent 2 decades as a parliamentarian, I have been very firmly of the view that outdoor education is one of the most valuable and rewarding learning experiences that any young person can have. And residential outdoor education, when young people can experience an environment that's very far removed from their usual everyday situations, is often life-changing. And that is why this bill is so important. Adventurous new experiences in the outdoors allow young people to develop lifelong connections to the natural environment. They build self-esteem, reliance, confidence and, most importantly, resilience. They also help young people to learn leadership skills, the importance of valuing friendship and what it means to be part of a team. These are the skills which not only enrich our own lives as individuals, but they are also the skills which benefit society and which employers want to see in new recruits to the workforce. This is therefore a very good day for those who believe passionately that residential outdoor education and learning in the outdoors more generally is a positive formative experience. We know too that the current set-up has not been delivering well enough when it comes to residential opportunities, and the scrutiny of my bill over the last 3 years has shone a light upon that. Despite moves to improve matters when the Scottish Government's vision for outdoor learning was produced in 2010 and the pledge within the 2021 SNP manifesto, and despite some schools and some local authorities doing a first-class job, significant gaps remain. There is considerable inequality of provision, particularly for pupils with additional support needs and those from disadvantaged backgrounds, and there is a wide variation in resource provision across our different local authorities. There is also inequality of provision between the independent school sector, for which residential outdoor education is embedded in the extra curriculum. These inequalities, Deputy Presiding Officer, are unfair. At the time of the financial memorandum, I referred to the bill as an investment and an example of preventative spend in action. So I refer again to the evidence collected by the Outward Bound Trust across 8 countries, including the UK, which found that for every £1 invested in outward bound programmes, there is a return of between £5 and £15 in societal value. For me, that is a very powerful finding, and one which represents the healthy long-term investment in our young people and society generally. But this investment is not just purely financial. The bill's provisions will help to address some of the stubborn and deep-seated problems facing our schools, from attainment to attendance, from behaviour to well-being. And it's a vitally important part of the jigsaw, particularly in the post-COVID era, when we have to work even harder to build resilience in our young people. The bill that I hope we will pass this evening no longer places a duty on the Scottish Government to fund the full provision. This will, I hope, provide the flexibility needed to ensure that there is a mixed funding model, drawing on financial support from a range of sources across the public, private and voluntary sectors, and including parental support. But what's so important is that those who cannot afford to pay are not required to, and that the parents of pupils with additional support needs are not charged extra because of that. I think Mr Mason would like to intervene.
John Mason.
Yeah, thank the member very much for giving way. She says the government will not have to pay the full amount, but I've read the supplementary financial memorandum, and it does not give a figure for what the government will have to pay. So can she give any kind of estimate as to what this is going to cost the government?
Well, can I thank Mr Mason for the intervention? And the costs have not changed since the original discussion about that, but as the member knows, throughout stage 2, we introduced a period of staged introduction of the bill and also changed the commencement date. And the Minister has put on record that there will be additional funding for those who have additional support needs, so that nobody is going to have to pay extra for that, and also for those families that can't afford that. And I'm very grateful to the Minister for doing that. Now, there is an explicit requirement in the bill on the Scottish Government to consult with trade unions where preparing guidance. And again, I thank Pam Duncan-Glancy for her work in strengthening the bill in this way at stage 2. And obviously, earlier this afternoon, during the stage 3 amendments, teachers who are not in trade unions and representatives of young people themselves must now also be consulted by the Scottish Government before preparing the guidance. And these are all very positive steps. Similarly, there were some changes earlier today to establish what the statutory guidance must include, again strengthening the bill. The commencement date, as I mentioned, has changed, and rather than the bill automatically coming into force on the 7th of July next year, the Scottish Government will now commence the Act by regulations, and that allows the Government, education authorities, managers of grant-aided schools, outdoor education sector and other key partners such as trade unions and school leaders to have more space in terms of readiness. Presiding Officer, I want at this stage to thank the outdoor education sector for its tireless support for the bill. And it's good to see many of the representatives of the sector in the public gallery this afternoon. I also want to thank my colleagues across the chamber, my staff, the non-government bill unit, which, Deputy Presiding Officer, I have to say is one of the biggest assets of this Parliament, and the many young people who have quite clearly believed that this bill could provide them with life-changing opportunities. I'm also very pleased that the Minister for Children, Young People and the Promise and the Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills see the benefits of this bill, and I thank them both for their very constructive engagement in getting us to where we are today. And I'm grateful to them for respecting the will of the Parliament. Finally, can I thank the Education, Children and Young People Committee and its convener, Douglas Ross, for the excellent scrutiny of my bills at stages 1 and 2, Kenny Gibson and colleagues on the Finance Committee and Public Administration Committee for their scrutiny, and the delegated powers and law reform. Therefore, Deputy Presiding Officer, it is an honour for me to move that the Parliament agrees to the Schools Residential Outdoor Education Scotland Bill be passed.
Thank you, Ms Smith. I call on Natalie Donnan as Minister. Around 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Many people will have been privileged in their youth to have enjoyed time away from home at a residential outdoor education facility, often in spectacular parts of the Scottish countryside. And for those children and young people who continue to benefit from such experiences, most have very positive memories. And that really is the point of the Schools Residential Outdoor Education Scotland Bill, to ensure that more children and young people in Scotland get to benefit from residential outdoor education well into the future. The fact that we are here debating the merits of the bill as amended is down to Liz Smith, who introduced it and has stewarded it through Parliament. The work that this requires is significant, and I thank Liz and her team for the productive and constructive engagement that we have had as a part of this. It was not an easy decision for Government to make in deciding whether to support this bill. In addition to the small matter of putting part of the curriculum on a statutory footing, there were and remain significant challenges to overcome in delivery, particularly in relation to cost and to workforce considerations. We must also ensure... Yes?
Paul Mason.
I thank the Minister for giving way, and I want to ask her the same question. She talks about cost. Does she have any idea what the Government might have to pay for this?
Minister.
Well, I've been clear throughout the process of this bill about the need to gather data to have a true understanding of the full costs associated with the bill, and amendments that have been taken forward at stage 2 and stage 3 will allow us to do that. Equally, the removal of the duty to fund, I think, will allow us to look at alternative sources of funding, something that I know I'd already discussed with the committee and the member in charge. So while there aren't finalised costs at the moment, I believe that the steps that have been taken through stage 2 and stage 3 will allow us a better period of time to gather that data prior to commencement. So we must ensure that wider forms of outdoor learning are not crowded out due to prioritising a focus on residential outdoor education. But, ultimately we concluded that all such issues could be overcome or addressed in the legislative process and into the implementation phase, as I've just outlined to Mr Mason. The Education Committee heard a range of evidence around the positive impact that residential outdoor education can have, for example, from helping to strengthen pupil-teacher relationships to building a young person's confidence and improving well-being. Indeed, many schools already provide this experience as part of supporting the transition of pupils from primary to secondary school. And it's for these reasons that the Scottish Government provided additional financial support to the sector during the COVID pandemic, so that it might survive its impact. Research also suggests that the residential experience can provide added benefits for young people in more socio-economically deprived circumstances. In this context, it's not surprising that the issue of equity has been a key one explored during the bill process. Ahead of Stage 2, I discussed the question of equity with Liz Smith at some length, and in particular we reflected on the capacity of the outdoor education sector to deliver for children and young people with complex and multiple support needs. I want to thank the outdoor education sector for the input and the insight provided on this matter, amongst others, over the course of this bill process. And in particular, I welcome the engagement of the Association for Heads of Outdoor Education Centres, the Outward Bound Trust and the organisation PGL Beyond. What these discussions and others have demonstrated is that realising the intent and the ambition of the bill will take time, but that implementation process will be easier to achieve due to Parliament agreeing to allow for a longer lead-in time to commencement. And this approach will enable key partners, including COSLA, ADES and teacher trade unions, to engage more fully with the requirements of the bill and help us to work collaboratively and collectively to deliver on the statutory duties. I thank all of these organisations again for their engagement during the bill process and helping to inform our thinking on how best to respond to the bill's requirements. An early and critical...
Pollocky.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for taking the intervention, and I recognise what she's saying about that strength of engagement. But does she recognise that everyone across the Chamber will have had communication, even as late as this week, from school leaders about their concerns, particularly around staffing and around the resource that will be available, and that those will need to be clearly addressed in guidance? And what would she say to those school leaders to try and give them further reassurance?
Minister, I can give you the time back.
I very much recognise those concerns. I've laid those concerns out very clearly to the Chamber, to committee, in a number of conversations. In fact, I engaged directly with the teacher trade unions to discuss their concerns at various stages of this bill. So I would say that I absolutely hear those concerns, and I would go back to what I've said around the staging of the implementation, the need to gather data and the need to really understand the next steps that need to be taken prior to commencement. Presiding Officer, I made clear in my parliamentary statement to this Chamber on the 24th of September that if Government was to be in a position to support the bill, we needed to see the affordability of its provisions addressed. And this was in relation to ensuring equity of provision, workforce implications and the duty on Scottish ministers to fund. And I really do welcome that Liz Smith and others were receptive to this. And collectively, we've worked to improve the bill in this regard, specifically through the amendments at Stage 2 to the so-called duty to fund provision and the enabling of financial contributions to be sought. Notwithstanding these improvements, implementing the bill will still incur substantial costs for education authorities, and I fully expect COSLA to bring these into future budget discussions. Overall, I am pleased that we've been able to work together across Parliament to find common ground to arrive at a bill that I hope we can all support. And I look forward to hearing other members' contributions to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And I call Douglas Ross, around 4 minutes. Mr Ross.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And I had the easiest job in Parliament tonight to open a debate on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives, because it's our Scottish Conservative colleague, Liz Smith, who has done all the work, an incredible amount of work, bringing us to this stage with her own team in her office and the Non-Government Bills Unit team. They have really achieved something that at some stages in this process it looked maybe unachievable. But at any point where there were challenges, Liz Smith got stuck in and ensured they were overcome, to ensure that we can, as a Parliament tonight, vote for this bill to become law. And I'll be proud to vote for this bill. And as convener, I'm not speaking tonight as convener of the committee, but as convener of the committee, I was privileged to sit through the evidence sessions on this bill, to hear from people who are passionate about the bill, as Liz Smith is, and to share their experience about what this bill will achieve for so many others. And I'm delighted so many of them are in our public gallery tonight to watch this final element of the bill's passage. And I always remember when we were constructing a report, it's included in there, when I spoke in the Stage 1 debate, and I want to use the words again tonight, a letter that was read out to the committee by Nick March. It was on the 13th of November, so over a year ago. But the words Nick read out to us at committee stuck with me at the time and still stick with me now. They were from a young pupil called Nevis. Now, Nevis has cerebral palsy, is a full-time wheelchair user and needs support with feeding, and an adult with him at all times. And Nick wanted the committee to hear, and I want Parliament to hear, the difference outdoor residential learning made to Nevis. So these are Nevis's words being read out in Nevis's Parliament as we're about to pass a bill that Nevis supports. Rock climbing was awesome. I got to defy gravity and abseil down a mountain at the speed of light. Kayaking was so cool. Literally, I sailed round an island with my school friends in a storm. I scored a goal at archery, and we all did drumming together at night, and it was really exciting and fun. I've never done any of those things before. I can't do so many of those things at home because they don't have spaces for kids with wheelchairs to join in. I think every kid should get the chance to go to camp, have adventures and hang out together. I think Nevis articulated very clearly why this bill was so important to Liz Smith, while she has committed so much of her parliamentary career to getting it onto the statute book, and why it's so important that the Parliament agrees to this bill tonight, because there are so many opportunities for kids like Nevis now and in the future as a result of this bill to get the experiences that don't just stick with them during their school career but remain with them throughout their entire life. We heard at committee the difference it makes to classroom environments, that people who maybe have one view of a teacher before they go on a weeks-long residential course have a totally different view when they come back, and that aids education and the atmosphere and the environment in our classrooms going forward. There are so many positives with this bill. I was delighted when the committee could agree the general principles, when the Parliament overwhelmingly supported this bill at stage 1, and why I think the Parliament should and will tonight support it into law. And finally, Presiding Officer, sometimes we have divisions in this chamber where we disagree very strongly. At other times we can see the nugget of an idea that can be brought forward by an individual member who is able to work across the political parties to bring something to fruition. And I think that's something that Liz Smith should be very proud of tonight, but also we as a Parliament should be proud of, that we have been able to see an opposition member work with the government to enact something into law that will make a real difference. So, Presiding Officer, I'm not only delighted to speak in favour of this bill, I will be very proud tonight to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Ross. And I call Martin Whitfield around 4 minutes. Mr Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Deputy Presiding Officer. And as we conclude this debate, I don't want to dwell on some of the journey this bill has had to go through and mention things like financial memorandums. I do want to return to the heart of the bill, the belief that every child in Scotland should have the chance to experience residential outdoor education. It's not just a trip away from home. It's about opening doors to opportunities that will shape lives. We know from decades of evidence and from the testimony heard at stage 1 that the experiences build confidence, they build resilience, they build independence in our young people. They build teamwork, they problem solve, they build leadership skills in ways that classrooms just simply cannot do. For many young people, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, the residential outdoor experience is transformative. It sparks ambition, it strengthens relationships, improves well-being, as we've heard from the evidence heard at stage 1. Teachers have spoken of pupils that return from these experiences more engaged, more motivated, more successful in their learning, and often seeing their teacher as a human being, perhaps for the first time. And some teachers seeing young people as human beings, perhaps for the first time. Outdoor residential education plays a vital role in Scotland's wide educational goals. It complements curriculum for excellence, learning for sustainability. And at a time when mental health challenges among young people are rising, the benefits of time outdoor, away from screens, immersed in Scotland's landscape, cannot be overstated. Deputy Presiding Officer, this bill is not about imposing burdens. It is about investing in Scotland's future. It is about giving our young people experiences that will help them thrive in school, in work and in life. It is about saying that outdoor learning is not an optional extra, an essential part of a well-rounded education. And it is right that we have picked up on correspondence that we've received, but also from the teaching profession during the course of this bill. And I welcome the government's agreement to collect data, in particular on the effect, because it is only hand in hand with our teachers, with those other adults that support our young people, can this outdoor learning experience reach its best. I am conscious of time, and before I close, I would like just to pay a short and, I hope, deeply embarrassing tribute to Liz Smith, MSP, because this bill will stand as a legacy of her work in the Scottish Parliament, as a testament to her passion for Scotland's children and young people. This member has championed a cause tirelessly because she understands the life-changing impact these experiences will have. And if the bill passes tonight, it's not just a policy achievement, it's a reflection on the member's dedication to fairness and opportunity. You know, there will be children who will laugh. There will be children who will hug a teddy tight on what they think is a cold night. They will get covered in mud. And you know, they probably will never know the member's name. But those children will find a resilience inside themselves because of what I hope the member will achieve today with this bill. And from those nameless children of today and tomorrow to possibly a nameless MSP of the future, can I say a massive thank you on their behalf? Can I urge members to support the bill at stage 3? Let us make residential outdoor education an entitlement, not a privilege. And in doing so, we will give Scotland's children a confidence and a resilience. And you know what? A bit of joy and happiness which they deserve. I'm grateful.
Thank you. I call Ross Greer. Around 4 minutes. Mr Greer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I follow on from Martin Whitfield in starting by paying tribute to Liz Smith at the risk of giving my members a bit of potential buyer's remorse with their recent leadership vote. I can say without hesitation that I will certainly miss her contributions to this Parliament when she takes her well-earned retirement. Liz Smith and I have served on the same committees for almost all of the decade that I've been a member of this Parliament, on the Education Committee and the Finance Committee. And we've agreed on far more than I think people outside of this building and maybe even some of our own colleagues would have expected. Probably more in the education portfolio than in finance, but a bit of both. But what I really respect more than that about Liz Smith is where we disagree. Because it's not always the case in this place that when you hear a member making a contribution, you believe without a shadow of a doubt that they believe what they're saying. Sometimes members are saying what they've been told to say. I know every time that I have profoundly disagreed with Liz Smith, that she is coming at it from a place of absolute conviction, and that I can understand why she believes what she does. And I think we need to have far more of that quality of debate, far more of that kind of principled position in all parties in this place. And I do believe that certainly the Conservative benches, but the Parliament as a whole, will be poorer next session as a result of Liz Smith no longer being here. In starting my contribution at stage 1, I mentioned my own experience of the classic Primary 7 residential trip, and I want to bring it back up now because I think some of the amendments that we've made to the bill are actually quite relevant to that particular experience. My class went to Castle Toward in Dunoon, which for those of my generation was famous as being the setting for the CBBC show Raven. We were all incredibly excited to effectively be using the set of that show when we were there for that trip. But we almost didn't get to go because the day before we were due to go back in 2006, it was one of the heaviest snowstorms that Scotland had experienced, I think, for some years, possibly some decades at that point. The trip was almost cancelled. So I do want to reflect on the fact that some very practical and sensible amendments were made to the bill at stage 2 to recognise those potentially exceptional circumstances whereby it may well be that the obligation to provide this opportunity in some circumstances isn't possible, and that the school or local authority shouldn't be held liable if circumstances are out with their control. The Greens are, of course, going to support this bill at stage 3. We've supported it throughout the process because it fulfils commitments we made in our own manifesto to guarantee every pupil at least a week of residential outdoor experience, to remove the financial barriers from that, and to expand outdoor play and learning provision across the board. The benefits of outdoor education are absolutely undisputed, certainly across this Parliament, even those who may be sceptical of the specific proposals in this bill. We all recognise the physical and mental health benefits of this are absolutely undisputed. But the ability to develop skills like team working, the transformational impact that it can have on the social development of individual young people, on their confidence in particular. I mentioned at stage one that we can't just see outdoor education as being that one-off, that 1 week of residential education, often at primary 7. I know that's certainly not the intention of this bill, but I think we should probably recognise that that week has a particular place in the popular imagination of people across this country, and we do need to make clear that outdoor education is about so much more than that. And we do now have a fantastic resource in Learning for Sustainability here in Scotland, where we can push that ongoing experience of outdoor education, not just in our natural environment. Of course, outdoor education can take place in the built environment as well, but there is a particular benefit in learning about our natural environment in the natural environment. Such is the nature of these curtailed debates, Presiding Officer. I'll finish off here, not because I'm closing my speech, but because in a few minutes I will get back up to deliver my closing speech. So I will deliver concluding remarks at that point and end quite abruptly here.
Thank you, Mr Greer. And I call Willie Rennie again. Around 4 minutes, Mr Rennie.
I just want to start by thanking Ross Greer for reminding me of how old I am, that he was in primary 7 in 2006, which was just yesterday from my regard. But also I want to thank all the staff in the Parliament, the non-government bill unit, the legislation team, the clerks, but also the officials. To Liz Smith for our tenacious approach, the never say die approach to the legislation process, the way that she is meticulous with every single point and fierce. Which brings me to the Minister. I also want to pay tribute to the Minister for facing Liz Smith and actually still being alive at the end of the process. But she also deserves credit for reaching an agreement with Liz Smith, despite the complications of this bill. I too will miss Liz Smith from this Parliament. I think she brings a degree of seriousness, also a considered approach, and also an intellectual rigour that I think this Parliament will miss. My view about this bill has fluctuated. I signed in the initial stages the bill to allow it to proceed. I supported the principle of it. I have been concerned, as we were scrutinising it through committee, about costs, which is something, as Paul O'Kane has highlighted, has been brought to our attention again by school leaders across the country who are concerned about the costs, and that's an issue we will return to later. But also additional support needs that Pam Duncan-Glancy has highlighted correctly, but also the element of whether teachers are compelled, when previously it's been a voluntary arrangement for them to attend these sessions. So my support has been challenged, but I was persuaded by the merits of the bill for a number of different reasons. And the first one is that in 2010, that outdoor learning strategy was published with a 27-page vision, and almost nothing was done for 14 years until Liz Smith brought forward her bill. And then, just by chance, we created a working group, and that's the solution for everything. That a working group is created. Now, I'm sure the Minister will dispute that nothing happened in that time. Certainly, I'll take it on to you.
I thank Mr Rennie for that intervention. I think we spoke at length during committee of the number of fantastic outdoor educational opportunities. Fair enough, not all residential, but that many of our school pupils get to experience on a daily basis. Could the member recognise that?
Willie Rennie, you can give the time back.
I recognise that she tried to convince me that progress was made. Whether progress was made is another matter. But this working group was brought up just at that point. And my second point was that if we rejected this bill, this would send a clear message to those in the gallery today and those across the country that their sector didn't matter anymore. And that is, so there's no neutral position with this bill. You either support it or you don't. And if we didn't support it, that would send a clear message that we didn't regard it as a priority, and that would have ramifications across the public sector through councils, local authorities, but also teachers, and they wouldn't therefore regard it as important anymore. So we couldn't go back. We had to support this or not. And the third element was that many schools were delivering, and I suppose this is credit to the Minister, some schools were delivering this already. So if some were able to do it, all should be able to do it. And that's why the bill, in the end, was necessary. But there is still outstanding business, because we haven't, as John Mason quite rightly has alerted us to, we haven't resolved the issue of finances, because we can't magic money out of nowhere. This will need to be addressed in the budgetary process. And I think what this bill, however, has done is that it's shifted the priority. It's given a clear indication to all the parties in the Parliament that this should be given a greater priority. It will be given an indication to local authorities that it should be given a greater priority. But we still need to resolve it. We still need to find the money. But because we've all spoken, I think today, maybe apart from John Mason, we've all spoken today with one voice that this bill should go through, that will send a clear message to all our finance spokespersons and also the Finance Minister that this should be given the appropriate finance that's necessary to make it a reality.
Thank you. We now move to open debate speeches. I call first Christine Graham to be followed by Brian Whittle. Around 4 minutes. Ms Graham.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I too congratulate Liz Smith. I know the work needed for a Member's Bill, testing your commitment, obstacles are put in your way, and you just have to navigate your way around them. I did, just like the member. And it's not just opposition Members' Bill, I assure you, and these bills are very personal, close to the member's heart, as this one is. I heard the member on the radio referring to more and more children finding traditional education a challenge, and that outdoor activities can be fun in themselves, but also therapeutic. I quite agree. Even before COVID disrupted the educational and social experience of young people, that generation already had challenges that I did not have in my long-lost youth. Their emotional and mental well-being is taking a hammering. In my youth, yes, Mr Rennie, I did have one, there was little telly and no internet, just a few parked cars on the street, which became our ad hoc playground. You were outdoors exercising without knowing it. My late mother's mantra when we were exhausting her patients, go outside, the fresh air will do you good, turned out to be true. So introducing this requirement in schools is right and timely, particularly, but not only, as we see an explosion in numbers of children with additional support needs. Facilities exist, and the member will recall that in the Stage 1 debate, I supported the principle of the bill, but I caveated that support on the real issue of funding. So I'm heartened to hear the exchanges today on that issue. I also referenced then the Broomley Outdoor Education Centre near West London, which I visited on several occasions, providing residential outdoor experiences for young people, providing life-changing experiences in the outdoors, children facing the pressures and anxiety of a post-lockdown world, coupled with the difficulties of a cost of living crisis because most of those children are from less well-off areas. The centre manager, Richard Gerrish, wrote to me at that time, quote, "This issue is clearly very close to our hearts because we have witnessed firsthand the ever-increasing numbers of children from economically disadvantaged areas who are missing out on these valuable experiences." That's an abbreviated quote. Much of what that centre provides is reflected in the bill, and I could see Broomley providing just such an experience. Many moons ago, as a working-class child, my first time away from parents was with the Girl Guides, camping at North Berwick, and later as a teenager on a fortnight retreat at Iona. Invaluable experiences. So blame the Girl Guides and Iona for the way I am today. Finally, and others have said this, and I'm not just saying it because they've said it, Liz Smith's retiral next year will, of course, be a loss to this Parliament. As I also said about Maurice Golden, both MSPs that I value in this Parliament, but I really must not make a habit of saying these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Graham. I now call Brian Whittle to be followed by John Mason. Around 4 minutes. Mr Whittle.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I am delighted to stand in support of my colleague and friend Liz Smith's bill on school and residential outdoor education. Because sometimes, Presiding Officer, I do think perhaps we lose sight of what we mean by education and what we mean and what we're trying to achieve. It's too easy for us here to get wrapped up in exam results. Increasingly, we seem to be less involved in teaching and learning and increasingly push testing. Standardised testing is important, of course, but it should not be the dominant culture in education. They should be a diagnostic. They are a help. Tests are there to support learning, not to obstruct it. The role of a teacher is to facilitate learning, and our teachers are expert in that. It's the fire that compelled them down the educator pathway. And I fear we have been increasingly forcing our teachers to follow a set path that squeezes the alternative routes to learning increasingly devoid of creativity and ensuring one of compliance, of standardisation. But what is a standard child? Everybody learns in a different way. The art of teaching, and it is an art, is developing different learning approaches that include all pupils in that learning experience. What teachers are brilliant at, if given the tools and the opportunity, is that ability to excite the power of imagination and curiosity, engender creativity, the power of what could be. And we all know what that feeling is, before society gets the opportunity to stick its oar in and stifle blue sky thinking and imagination. And it talks about what we can't do rather than what is possible. And to me, that's the epitome of what my friend and colleague Liz Smith's outdoor education bill is about. Give every pupil the opportunity for that alternative learning experience, because what initially sparks that fire will be different for every pupil. Teachers know how to teach. Build a raft, paddle a canoe, and what a fantastic way to introduce physics and the Archimedes principle. How about flying down a zip line and introduce and discuss gravity? All the while pushing that creative element, that leap of faith, approaching new challenges that pupils may never have even considered but now have to solve. Give them an obstacle to overcome, to work together to find that solution as a team, to have that lifelong shared experience I have often spoken about in here. I would call that, in sporting parlance, deductive coaching. It's ever apparent that the elements of our education system that support expression, those alternative routes to achievement, those that help to build that resilience and that confidence and that drive to aspire, are being squeezed out of our education system. Sport, art, music, drama, and yes, outdoor education create an alternative learning environment that will allow some pupils to thrive and flourish in a way they may struggle in a traditional classroom. Lessons outside the classroom, presiding officer, that are so important to delivering and achieving in the classroom. It's time to stop forcing our young people down an ever-narrowing education tunnel that fits a decreasing number of pupils. It's time to give them back the full suite of tools for teaching. Give it back to our educators that allow them to deliver all they can and are more than willing to do. Because what we're trying to tackle in our education system, poor physical and mental health, poor attainment, poor behaviour, a narrow, compliant learning experience devoid of space to allow creative thinking and devoid of a place to try and fail and try again, is a learning environment that many pupils will struggle to be the best they can be. Moreover, the chances of full pupil engagement are unlikely. Presiding officer, outdoor education is an adventure. And goodness me, do our young people need some adventure. It's an environment to learn where you don't even realise you're learning. It's a world of possibilities. It's an opportunity that all our pupils deserve. And I urge the Chamber to support Liz Smith's bill. Presiding officer.
Thank you, Mr Whittle. Now call the final speaker in the open debate, John Mason again. Around 4 minutes, Mr Mason.
Thank you very much. And I hate to be the one who's a bit of a wet blanket at the party. However, I would start by thanking Liz Smith very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I thank her for bringing forward this bill, and I really agree with virtually everything that's been said this afternoon and at committee about the values of residential outdoor education. I was keen to speak in this afternoon's debate, as I've been involved in the bill throughout and being in both the Education and Finance committees. And I've met virtually no one who disagrees with the principle of the bill that all young people should have the opportunity of a week's residential outdoor education during their school career. And I'm in full agreement with that as well myself. We had many witnesses at committee testifying to that, and I also meet people outside, friends, teachers, parents, former pupils, who are also very supportive of the idea. However, the problems for myself arose around the finances, as originally planned for when the bill was introduced. There was a question of whether the financial memorandum accurately estimated the likely costs, which Liz Smith put it up to £36 million and the government said up to £40 million, but the question then as to whether that would include upgrading outdoor centres, whether teachers would need to be paid for carrying out a new statutory responsibility, and also whether better-off families who currently can and do pay for their children's courses should suddenly make a big saving because the state would fund everyone. Therefore, I was glad that at stage 2, Liz Smith and the Government agreed on amendments allowing parents to be charged if they could afford to pay all or part of the costs. And that has been further refined at stage 3 with the requirement for the Government to give guidance on this point. So far, so good. What I am considerably less happy about is the supplementary financial memorandum, which I think we received on Friday the 5th. It does not include any estimate of additional capital expenditure or other costs, which were originally considered to be too low in the financial memorandum. There is no additional cost estimate included for capital improvements to the outdoor centres, nor is there any provision for teachers' terms and conditions being changed, extra staff cover in the schools and similar costs, which the EIS and others have raised with us. All it is really dealt with in the supplementary financial memorandum is the effect of amendments at stage 2, which effectively is a question of how costs will be shared out, not what the costs will actually be. Yes?
Brian Whittle.
Very grateful for John Mason for taking an intervention. Would you also agree, though, it not included in that financial memorandum is the spend to save over a long period of time? And if we'd started this 10 years ago, we'd be in a much better position.
John Mason.
I agree there is money to save. It raises the whole question about preventative spend, that we need to spend £1 today, and where is that £1 going to come from? But his general point is absolutely correct. Now, at paragraph 24, under costs for parents and carers, it says, quote, "The precise costs of the bill's provisions on parents and carers is impossible to estimate," unquote. And of course that means that the cost to the government is also not even estimated. Now, no one is asking for the FM or supplementary FM to give precise costs, but they should be giving best estimates. So for us to be looking at a bill today which does not even have estimated costs for the government causes me considerable concern. Therefore, we are faced with passing a bill today with no idea what the costs are likely to be. And members would see I asked both the member and the minister for an estimate of costs, and neither was able to give me that. And I'm somewhat surprised that the government has agreed to this. It very much goes against the whole principle of financial memorandums, which require best estimates of all costs. The Finance Committee has not discussed this recently, but I certainly feel that it sets a difficult precedent. Therefore, whilst fully supporting the intentions of Liz Smith and her bill, I really have reservations about voting for such an open-ended blank cheque when it comes to the finances. We are asking for trouble in the future when a new government, after the election, is faced with demands which it may or may not be able to meet. Therefore, it would be my intention to abstain at the final vote today. I regret that I feel that is my only option for the reasons I have given, and I hope I am proved wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mason. We now move to closing speeches. I call Ross Greer. Around 4 minutes. Mr Greer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In my opening speech, I mentioned the value of learning about our natural environment in our natural environment and the knowledge and skills that are accumulated through that. I want to build on that for a moment and go back to a point that I made to the Minister when she made a statement on this bill back in, I believe it was September, about the need for our qualification system to catch up here. Parliament will today make a really clear statement about the value that we place on outdoor education, not just on residential outdoor education, but all outdoor education. I don't think our qualification system has yet caught up with that. There is much more that it can and should do. For example, specific qualifications. In England, they recently established a GCSE and A-level in natural history. We don't yet have an equivalent to that in Scotland. But there's also the kind of meta skills that are developed that we've already discussed today, things like teamwork and communication skills that our qualification system just does not yet fully recognise. So I would encourage the government to say that this has to be the start of that process, and one of those next steps is about reforming the qualification system to make sure that the full range of subjects is available, and I would encourage the creation of a natural history qualification, certainly, but that we find a way, whether it's through the recommendations made by Professor Hayward or some other means, to formally recognise those kind of meta skills that are really developed, that can have there can be a transformational impact on a young person's skills in areas like teamwork, communication, etc., through the residential outdoor education experience. Now, This Parliament, for really the entirety of its existence, has quite an extensive history of legislating for rights and entitlements that we then really struggle to actually fulfil. The Finance Committee has raised the issue around that more widely, repeatedly in this session. Much of the debate around the specifics of this bill has come back to making sure that this experience would be available for young people with additional support needs. Now, they're one particular group in our society right now who are not having their rights consistently fulfilled and respected by our education system. So there is a challenge for us in there, and it relates very much to the cost points that John Mason's made, certainly. I think there were helpful amendments made at stage 2 and earlier today to ensure the cost around this bill is shared equally. I think we have achieved a balance between making reasonable requests of parents who can afford to make a contribution with the importance of avoiding families whose children have particularly complex additional support needs or families who are on lower incomes from being forced to pay more than would be fair or that they would be capable of doing. Now, I certainly cannot in any way, shape or form claim any of the credit for having come to those solutions. So I would congratulate colleagues, particularly Liz Smith, the Minister, and John Mason for having made those relevant amendments to the bill. I think there is still a need here for us to have a wider conversation about local government funding. If we want our young people to have the best start in life, then we need to fund it like we mean it. Now, it would be too much to hope that the last budget before the election will be the one that achieves a consensus, but particularly in relation to this bill, there's still a huge amount of work to do in bringing the existing outdoor residential education estate up to the standards that we and those who work in it expect. The capital implications of that are still going to be really significant, and that is something that members of the next session of Parliament are going to have to bear in mind. We're making a commitment today that will have ongoing costs associated with it, and that is then incumbent on all parties who vote for this bill to engage constructively when it comes to the budget to make sure that ongoing adequate capital allocations are made where that is required. In closing, Presiding Officer, I think it's just worth briefly reflecting on the process of this bill and the frustration felt cross-party at stage 1 with how the government interacted with it. But we've moved on significantly from that, and I would like to thank the government for their engagement at stages 2 and 3, and I would say that if we had much more of that in the final weeks of this Parliament, there would be far less pressure on our extremely strained legislative timetable. That kind of collegiate working should make it possible for us to get through the remaining bills of this session. This, though, will be a huge moment for Scotland's young people, and I want to congratulate Liz Smith again. This bill, when we pass it today, will unlock life-changing opportunities for so many children. It will be a proud moment for our Parliament, and certainly we in the Green Group will be proud to vote for it at decision time.
Thank you. I call on Paul O'Kane.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to close this debate on behalf of Scottish Labour, and in doing so to recognise that I've come somewhat late to the process at stage 3, but have been following the bill because of the interest that I have in it. And I know that we've heard a lot today in the debate about, I suppose, the genesis of the bill as it has developed from the initial concerns that were raised at stage 1 and work across a number of colleagues around the chamber to try and refine the bill so that it has got into the place that it is in today as we consider it at this final stage. And I think I would join with colleagues in terms of paying tribute to Liz Smith for her work and her dedication, and indeed trying to, I think, at each stage work to improve the bill and also to recognise the significant challenges that remain and will have to be dealt with in terms of the guidance the government will bring forward. I think the first thing to say today in summing up is that we all recognise the significant impact and contribution that outdoor education makes and residential outdoor education makes to children and young people in Scotland. I think we would join in paying tribute to all of those who have joined us today in the gallery, who are specialists and experts in that field and who have given evidence at every stage of this bill as to the impact that their work has. And I think we've heard a lot today about the importance of protecting those organisations and those specialisms and indeed the challenges that were posed not least by the pandemic in ensuring that we have a strong sector of outdoor residential education in Scotland, and that's very important. And indeed it was nice to hear some snippets of personal experience, of course, of people who have undertaken outdoor education. I would say to Ross Greer that another interesting fact about Castle Tyward is that it served as HMS Brontosaurus in the Second World War, and Winston Churchill was a frequent visitor, something perhaps he can share in his next engagement with Piers Morgan. So there we go. But I think what's important is that everybody recognises the value of this bill. That said, I think it is clear that there are significant challenges remaining, not least those that have been outlined in terms of the financial considerations to the bill and the pressure that is on local authorities. And in my exchange with the Minister, I referenced some of the remaining concerns of school leaders. And I think those really focus on a number of the challenges to do with staffing and ensuring sufficient staffing and cover, and ensuring that there is a significant contribution made by those parents who can do so, and that people do not feel that they can't make that contribution. Because the Minister and I'm not sure if, when we were councillors in Renfrewshire and East Renfrewshire, served on the Renfrewshire Educational Trust together. I don't know if the Minister did or not, but very often it was bodies such as that were required to fund the additional funding that was often required for residential outdoor trips. And what's clear is we need to get the balance right between those who can make a contribution and those who need that additional support, which will come from government. And I do recognise much of what was said around the challenges that have been in the financial memorandums in the leading up to this position. And I would have to say that I think some of the concerns that have been raised by school leaders and by teachers are perhaps reflective on wider issues that exist in Scottish education, in that after 18 years of the current government, there are a number of significant challenges, which we will debate, of course, on other days. But these are the things that are at the forefront of the minds of many head teachers and teachers. And I think that's being reflected, because I think what they would say is that they absolutely recognise the importance of outdoor education and of doing something about that, but that doesn't negate, of course, the other challenges that they're having to deal with on a daily basis. And I would say the member absolutely recognises that in terms of her leadership of this bill. So, conscious of time, Presiding Officer, and drawing these conclusions this afternoon, we will, of course, support this bill. The principle is absolutely right. Of course, what we must do now, as with any legislation, is ensure that the guidance is robust, the data is well gathered, and that the finance is appropriate in order to support local authorities and individual schools to be able to deliver a meaningful outdoor residential experience for every child in Scotland, and ensure that can be done for many generations to come. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. And I call on Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In the time I've served on the Parliament's Education Committee, there's been a repeating theme that teachers, parents and carers, trade unions, educationalists and indeed most MSPs who serve on the committee recognise, and that is that post-pandemic our young people continue to face major challenges. In many cases, the decisions taken during the lockdown has and continue to have negative impacts on our young people and the wider school environment. That is why this bill presents, I think, a positive opportunity to try to reset how we value and deliver a better offering for young people across Scotland, and for Parliament to send out a message that we want to see real investment in the development of our young people now and in the future. As has been said, no one doubts that outdoor education is one of the most rewarding experiences a young person can have during their school career. And I'd like to pay tribute to those who have joined us in the public gallery today for the dedication they bring and have dedicated their careers, in fact, to outdoor education and our young people. And as I've seen for myself, in so many cases, it is truly game-changing. It delivers benefits not only in school and learning, but long after pupils and teachers have returned to the classroom, the joy which young people have experienced from outdoor education. Residential trips help build confidence, self-reliance, resilience and leadership skills. They teach the values of friendship, teamwork and that lifelong connection with our fantastic great outdoors. And in an age when there is growing concern about young people's physical and mental well-being, the benefits of residential outdoor education cannot be overstated or underestimated. And it's worth reflecting that Scotland was one of the first countries in the world to formalise outdoor education. The last significant piece of legislation around outdoor education in 1944, around the Education Act, known as the Butler Act. In the 60s and 70s, outdoor education, often formalised as physical outdoor activities based on residential experiences, was extensively developed in many parts of Scotland. But sadly, in more recent times, the value of outdoor education hasn't been given the weight it deserves, or the outcomes that we need to help focus on as well for our young people, with many of our local authorities disinvesting in their outdoor educational offerings and indeed facilities. Today, we know that many children are disconnected from their learning environments and indeed our wonderful natural environment. So, Presiding Officer, Liz Smith's outdoor education bill, I believe, allows for a reset for us to once again nationally recognise the importance of residential outdoor education. As I stated in the Stage 1 debate, as an Edinburgh MSP, I know how incredibly lucky young people are, and parents and carers here in the capital, to be able to still access that residential outdoor education offering, which young people really enjoy and value. Many young people here in the capital see it as a rite of passage when I have spoken to them about the work the council have always valued in outdoor education as well. Finally, I want to put on record a tribute to my friend and colleague Liz Smith as well for the power of work which she has put in, and her parliamentary office and team and the Parliament's non-governmental bills unit as well, into this bill, and also for her lifelong advocacy and around the benefits of outdoor education to our young people, as both a teacher and also as a member of this Parliament. As we've heard today, Liz is widely respected across this chamber and beyond, but this bill is what is best for our young people in that post-COVID age, when so many indicators tell us young people are facing more challenges than ever before. And I do sincerely hope that in future years, all young people in Scotland will be able to experience the life-changing experiences which residential outdoor education actually delivers. As Martin Whitfield said, that will be a remarkable legacy for Liz Smith, and she should rightly be incredibly proud of the work she's done around this bill. But it will also be for us as a country and indeed Parliament to this evening send out the message to our young people, to parents and carers and teachers across our country, that we want to invest in you and value you, and I support the motion in Liz Smith's name.
Thank you. And I call on the Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In providing my final remarks today, I want to acknowledge the journey that the Schools Residential Outdoor Education Scotland Bill has been on. As I said at the start of this debate, the work that it takes to bring forward and see through a Member's Bill is substantial. Now, to give a little bit of my own personal experience, I didn't go on an outdoor residential trip when I was in school. I went on a historic trip to York, which actually suited me very much as a bit of a history buff. But I do count myself very lucky as someone who got to attend. I grew up in poverty, I've been very clear about that, who got to attend one of these trips because my school ensured that I and others were able to. And back in the year 2000, I think that's something that we can really celebrate. However, as a young, quiet, anxious and shy girl, having heard about the benefits first-hand from young people that this form of residential trip can have, I think it's really clear that this could have really helped to develop certain skills, confidence, relationships. I can certainly say that building a canoe or going whitewater rafting is something that is very, very alien to me when I was a little girl and still is. So I really do think it's wholly positive that more young people will get to experience the kind of outdoor educational residential trip that is right for them, and that the bill allows for that choice and ensures that the needs of pupils will be considered in terms of what learning experience will be best for them. Now, some of the considerations undertaken over the last year or more by Liz Smith, by MSPs and the Scottish Government, as we've heard in the Chamber today, have not been straightforward to navigate. And whether that's considerations around funding, equity of provision, including for pupils with additional support needs, workforce implications, sector capacity, monitoring or commencement, these issues and others have required very careful handling and input from a range of stakeholders to inform shared understandings. And members have called further attention to some of these and other important considerations, which I'll take 2 minutes to address. So I appreciate that some members have raised concerns around the funding, and as I said earlier, I've discussed this matter in detail with Liz Smith as part of jointly agreeing to the Stage 2 amendment to remove the duty of fund. And as part of seeking joint agreement, it will be necessary to develop a shared understanding with COSLA around what costs are considered reasonable to incur in providing the residential outdoor education entitlement to each pupil. And that will be for COSLA and the Scottish Government to determine potentially through budget discussions as I've set out. And equally, the commencement regulations will allow us the time to gather the data to further understand the extent of the funding required. Mr Greer talked about the capital funding to bring the sector to capacity, and I feel this is relevant to the debate around equity of provision as well. I think amendments that have came forward at stage 2 and stage 3, as I've already said, allow us to explore some alternate sources of funding. Now, Mr Rennie commented on a lack of progress since 2010, and he knows I will dispute that, I'm sure. Outdoor learning is and has been a priority, and there are a number of developments such as the Outdoor Learning Strategic Working Group, the £2 billion LEAP investment programme that will incorporate covered outdoor spaces. We've developed training materials for outdoor education, and I could go on. But after all this time, I'm not sure that I'm going to convince Mr Rennie, so I would be very happy to extend an invite to witness outdoor education in our schools alongside me first-hand. Conscious of time, a number of members have mentioned support for pupils with additional... Sorry, was I getting an intervention there? Yes, I'll take the intervention. I didn't hear that.
So, is it zip lining or is it building a canoe that we're going on? That's what I want to know.
Minister.
I'm open to both, Mr Rennie. A number of members have mentioned support for pupils with additional support needs, and I again want to put on record the commitment by Government to working closely with the sector to really ensure readiness for commencement, including considering capacity to meet the needs of pupils with additional support needs. Now, to conclude, as I know I'm short of time, being frank, the issues I've discussed will not be matters for me or Liz Smith, as we both prepare for quite different reasons to stand down, and they should not be allowed to stand in the way of the achievement this bill represents. Presiding Officer, I can't conclude without paying tribute to Liz Smith. Liz has been a long-time advocate of outdoor education, and it's very fitting as she approaches her retirement that this bill will be one of the last substantive contributions she makes as a long-serving MSP with a significant interest in education, both as an MSP and in her previous career as a teacher. I believe that as amended and through collaboration, we now have a statutory framework for residential outdoor education that supports equity in provision and access, and will enable more children and young people to benefit from these unique and impactful experiences. And for this vital reason, I am pleased to put the full support of Scottish Ministers behind it.
Thank you. And I call on Liz Smith to wind up the debate. Please take us to 6 p.m, Ms Smith.
Thank you. Well, if I knew that the bill was going to have Willie Rennie and the Minister in a canoe, I would have brought this forward much sooner than I did, but I look forward to that, and I can say to Mr Mason, who I sit beside on the Finance Committee, Mr Mason, in the last year I have moved you from voting against the bill to abstaining, and so I look forward to the period after Christmas when I'm still sitting beside you, I think at least at Kenny Gibson's behest. Perhaps we might just get you to support the bill. Presiding Officer, here we are. It's been a long journey where I can see the summit now appearing. We've been in the foothills of this bill for quite some time, perhaps rather longer than I had wished. But for all the wonderful tributes that you've paid to me this afternoon, can I just say that I wouldn't have got here without the Parliament and the engagement that each one of you has given to me. It's a two-way process. So thank you for your very warm regards and kindness, but I wouldn't have been able to do this bill without you. And I hope that this bill really personifies what this Parliament should be all about, because we should be able to work together. I always think that this bill, and certainly in my 20 years in it, I always think this Parliament works well when we can engage, despite our very strong political differences, and we do have them, let's be honest. But over the time that I've spent in this Parliament, I have seen sometimes our debates getting too toxic, too tribal, and too sort of unwilling to take on board some of the really important facts. And we should never forget that this bill is not about us. It's about the young people who, as Martin Whitfield rightly said, they will have new life-changing opportunities. I don't mind if they don't know who I am, but I do mind if they don't get the opportunity. So that's where we are. And I think I would also like to say that we're going to be the first part of the United Kingdom to be able to make it a statutory requirement that children must receive 4 nights and 5 days residential outdoor education in their school career. Colleagues in the Senate and in the House of Commons, Sam Rowlands and Tim Farron in particular, they're cheering us on. And I hope that because this bill is hopefully going to pass in a few minutes' time, that they too will be able to deliver in the other parts of the United Kingdom. Presiding Officer, I began this process when I lodged my draft proposal way back on the 22nd of April 2022. It's been a very lengthy route, but I do believe that it has been worthwhile. It's been well scrutinised. That's one of the reasons that I think it has been an important process, and I think it's very in tune with what government policy is wanting to deliver. Can I once again and finally say that I think that the non-government bill unit that we have in this Parliament is a huge credit to the work that they put in and have done for such a long period of time. I couldn't work without you. Thank you to you, to my staff, to all my colleagues, and I say to the outdoor education sector, but particularly to the young people who I think have proven to be the real success story of this, because they have really given us something extra, and I know the Deputy First Minister wants to intervene.
Deputy First Minister. Can I have Kate Forbes' microphone, please?
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the intervention. I just wanted an excuse to put on record my own acknowledgement of all that Liz Smith has done through this bill. And because interventions are usually questions, can I just ask if she agrees with me that all the best outdoor residential centres are actually in my constituency?
Liz Smith.
To have to partially agree with that. You certainly have the best mountains, and I look forward to going climbing them when I stand down from this Parliament. So, Presiding Officer, I'm very proud to stand here and ask the Parliament to vote for this residential outdoor education bill.
Thank you very much, Ms Smith. That concludes the debate on schools, residential outdoor education Scotland Bill at stage 3. We're about to move to decision time, and I'd be grateful, as members have been voting throughout the afternoon, if all members could take a moment just now to refresh their screens and to ensure that they are indeed logged on. Thank you.